Hello, everybody. Today we're going to go through my favorite games from 2025. 2025 was an interesting year because it didn't seem like there was a front runner for Game of the Year. Some people may disagree with me on that, but I didn't think there was a game that sort of ran away with it. I thought there were a lot of games that did a lot of awesome stuff that were cool in their own ways. It wasn't necessarily a quiet year. I played a lot of stuff. But it was also a year where I don't think there was one game that sort of stood out amongst the big releases or whatever that was like better than everything else. So yeah, we're going to go through games that I really liked from this year. I'll have timestamps in the description if you want to skip around and stuff like that. There's lots of games to get through, so we'll do some overviews and some summaries. I'll try to keep it as spoiler free as possible. I know some of these games came out a while ago, but if you've never heard of some of them, you may want to hop in, so I won't spoil any major details. If there are any games you really liked from 2025, specifically games that were like smaller games on Steam or indie games or whatever, please let me know. I'm always throwing games up on my wish list on Steam because I put all kinds of stuff up there that I think is interesting, and then oftentimes what happens is a Steam sale comes, I get a bunch of them, and my backlog fills to a horrendously tremendous amount. But when I get to them, it's really fun, especially when I'm able to play them in the year that they came out, and I can talk about them in videos like this. So yeah, let's get to it. The first one we're going to get to is The Children of Clay by Balazaz Ronai. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize. The Children of Clay is a stop motion point and click horror game / like puzzler where you have I think it's a Hungarian artifact in front of you, and you're doing like a survey of it or a study of it. And so there's like a book in front of you, and you are reading from it and kind of figuring out what this idol is. It's a free game. It's very short, but it is incredibly creepy. The art is cool because, again, it's stop motion, so everything looks claymation-y and weird, which is really neat. And yeah, it creeped me out a lot. I won't say much more than that. I will just say, if you like horror, if you want something that's like a 15-minute short story that's really cool and really potent, I would say check it out. Metal Garden by Tyneresoft. Metal Garden is one of those games that I put on my wish list and I kind of kept there for a while, and I wanted it to release fully before I played it because I think it was in early access for a while. But it's a game that follows a lot of trends. So if you're into different, I'm not even sure if this is like a genre of horror, but it's a motif or a theme that we see reoccurring in a lot of horror nowadays, the mega structure horror, right? Like buildings that are like brutalistic and massive and lord over you. Mike Klubnica has a lot of games where there are like giant buildings, or it involves some kind of structure that is like unnaturally massive. Babdi, I think it's pronounced Babdi, is another game that's about, you're in this like weird concrete metropolis and you're trying to escape and you're kind of running around. That one's free. It came out a few years ago. But the larger point here is that there is this fear of scale, this fear of insignificance, I think, this fear of forces that are sort of beyond like your comprehension that make these massive structures. You can't imagine sort of the power or the logistics to do so, I guess. But Metal Garden is very much of that genre, and it's a really solid FPS. It's actually a little challenging here and there. You don't know much about the world when the game first starts. If I remember correctly, you start outside of a broken down mech, so it's like your vehicle has died. So there's a hint that there is some kind of like technology, there's some kind of advanced technology in this world outside of the massive structure that you're in. But even the sky in the game, there's clouds, and then above the clouds there is what looks like a concrete roof. So it's a massive, like insanely huge structure, and as you go through, you get little tidbits of knowledge and information about the world and about the story, and it's fascinating. The atmosphere is really, really good, really thick. It really kept me interested. And yeah, it's another like short horror, and when I say horror, it's maybe horror in the sense that like Half-Life is horror, and even less so, because even Half-Life has like zombies and head crabs and stuff like that. But Metal Garden is just horror, I think, in its presentation, again, of those mega structures, of making you feel insignificant, of the drabness, I think that's a word, of it all, because it's all just like dark greens and dark grays, and there's no bright colors and dark browns. You know, it's very dour. It's very sad. It's very like there's not a lot of bright light in this. You know, it's like a consistent fog. Everything looks like concrete, which may be the point. But yeah, but the world, you kind of just want to keep going. The place you are at is low in gravity. And I think this is across the entire game, maybe just certain pieces of the game. I don't remember. But so you can like jump and enemies will jump after you. And so there's a little fold in the combat there. That's nice. But again, it's just short enough. And this is something that I think I admire a lot of short horror games for, is they know like exactly how short to make the experience so that it doesn't drag on, so that atmosphere lives with you just long enough and doesn't sort of become uninteresting, right? That fascination you get when you're in a really atmospheric game or whatever, I think it can be tough to keep that interest up if you're in that world for a long time, right? I think maybe this is why like people love the Stalker games so much, is because, and the Metro games, is because you have this incredibly like atmospheric, creepy, mysterious, hostile environment, and yet the games do a good job of keeping that consistent rather than making it eventually feel like you're just running around a place, at least in my opinion. So again, with these short horror games like Metal Garden, it's just long enough that it's really, really interesting, but you don't lose interest in that atmosphere. You don't lose interest in the mystery. And then toward the end, things get really fascinating. So yeah, another one I would recommend, another short horror game. And that's all I'll say for now. One Rotten Oath by Pyotr Bunkowski. So I reviewed One Rotten Oath on the channel. Please go check it out if you have not seen it. I think it's a very relatable, very blunt horror game that touches on something that is really human in a lot of ways, and maybe is something that is like, I don't know, a diagnosis of some like social anxieties of our time, maybe even. Again, I'm not going to spoil too much here, but it's a game about loneliness. It's a game about isolation. It's clearly a game, I think, that was partially inspired by the pandemic, as a lot of things are, and then it sort of finds its own footing off of there. So it's not about the pandemic per se, but I think it's about sort of some of the feelings and the isolation and the social impact of the pandemic, and then extending from there on a personal note, because it is semi-autobiographical. Pyotr Bunkowski is the developer of the game, and then he himself is in the game. So it's a story about the development of One Rotten Oath itself, but it's a fictional version where different things happen. And it expresses a lot of anxiety, you know, when you're creating something, when you're trying to present something to the world, when you're trying to express yourself in an art form, and you're terrified that people may not get it, or you're terrified that the thing that you made, you know, isn't going to communicate the thing you hope it communicates, or you have anxiety about how, you know, certain gatekeepers in the industry react to you. You know, one of the main themes or events of the game, I guess, is that Pyotr reaches out to publishers about One Rotten Oath. He's trying to get it published, and he hears back, and the publishers aren't interested. They want, you know, stuff that's more market friendly or whatever. And when you look at gameplay footage of One Rotten Oath, it does look outwardly amateurish and simple, right? The FMV doesn't necessarily strike you as scary. But again, this is a game that I think with its combination of music and storyline, I think it does find that terror. It does find that atmosphere that makes it creepy and kind of turns that campiness, that FMV campiness, into a creepiness. and I thought it was incredibly effective at that. And yeah, I picked it up. I picked up the demo during a Steam Next Fest, and you know, I was like, oh, this looks neat, and I played it, and I was instantly hooked, instantly intrigued by it. And then Piotr reached out, gave me a review code, which was very nice of him. And yeah, I ended up liking the game a lot. So I won't tell you where the story goes. I won't tell you how it ends. If you're a game developer, or really if you're anybody that makes stuff, if you're a writer, if you, I don't know, hell, if you cook, you know, if you make anything that is for other people, I think you'll be able to relate to this. If you're a game developer, I think you'll specifically have maybe a deeper relation to it because of these certain, the specific experiences that Piotr goes through. But yeah, another really good horror game, and another one that I really recommend. Necrophosis is a story-driven, yeah, I don't like the term walking simulator, but I can't think of a better term at the moment, so colloquially, that's what we'll use for now. But it's story-driven horror. You're walking through a world that is inspired by Zadislav Bekchinsky and H.R. Giger. Very obviously, if you look at some of the screenshots or the trailer footage or whatever. And the story is vague, but you're kind of putting together what you are, what the world is. And it's very basic, like puzzles. Go find a thing, put the thing, you know, go find a key and find the door that the key opens, and then go through that door. And, you know, it's very basic stuff. I don't remember like anything like combat or anything like that. But it does, I think, do a good job recreating the art of Bekchinsky and Giger. I think some of the writing was good. Some of the writing is just poems, and the game opens with a poem, and I forget who it's by, but it's just a famous poem. Like if you Google it, it's like, oh, okay, it's just a famous poem. But I think the game is about creation. I think it's about the origins of things, about the like primordial creation. I will say, so the game itself, I enjoyed it. It's fun. It's got creepy visuals. There's you know, there's lots of cool segments in it where they do a good job changing up the atmosphere. So, you know, at the beginning of the game, you're walking through this giant open desert that's like, I mean, it's linear, but it looks like a giant open desert with like a giant graveyard. And then eventually you go down into like a creepy temple that's all red, and there's like blood all over the floor and stuff like that. So instead of it just being a giant walk through, you know, one setting and one particular painting or something like that, I think the developers do find their own creative vision, right? They don't just use Bekchinsky and Giger. They find ways to create their own versions of it. But here's what I will say about that. So these two artists, Zadislav Bekchinsky and H.R. Giger, they've obviously, in the past 10 years, interest in them has been reignited. Giger obviously has been famous for a long time, you know, Alien, etc., etc. Bekchinsky, I think, has been famous in like different ways, but I don't know if I don't think he ever did like a movie or anything like that. But games like Returnal, Scorn, I think they've revived interest in the two artists because they've used visuals that heavily take from them. Dragon Age Veilguard, and the Necropolis in Dragon Age Veilguard, there's a very clear area that is based on a Bekchinsky painting. But I think what's interesting about those two artists is that their art is obviously about a lot. And Bekchinsky specifically, I think the stuff that you see, at least that I've seen in his work, is tougher to pin down. I think there are some anti-war themes, but it's tougher to pin down, like specifically if there's any one theme or anything he's specifically saying outside of making you feel something. Giger, on the other hand, is, I think, like erotically fixated on the mechanics of procreation. Some of this, I think, can get uncomfortable because oftentimes it feels... I don't know. Sometimes it does feel a little, I'm not sure how to put it. unconsensual. There, I'll say that. Just in some of how the sexuality of some of Giger's work is how he depicts sexuality in some of his work. But in other ways, his work is also very cynical. There's a painting of, or I think it was a paint. I don't remember if it was a sculpture or a painting first or what it was, but it's a gun that's firing little children out of it, and the children themselves have guns. So it's like, these children are being fired off into the world with a weapon to defend themselves. So it's like right out of the bat, they're into violence. They're into a world that they have to fight off rather than take in. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because Scorn was a game that I had mixed feelings on. I think a lot of people had mixed feelings on it, but Scorn used those two artists, specifically Giger, and I think they matched Giger's the same themes, right? Because Scorn is also a game that's about procreation. It's about societal castes. It's about labor. And a lot of it is, again, like creepily sexual, right? Like one of the guns you get has like a phallic part of it, and you have to jam it into areas to like make things work. And there's a parasite in the game that lodges itself onto you, right? And obviously parasites, they need other beings to live. So there's similar themes there in that it sort of matches some of the stuff that Giger has in his work. Now, Necrophosis, I think, uses a lot of their work, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I played through it again, maybe I'm being a little too harsh here, but I think a lot of the game uses Bekczynski and, again, Giger's work, specifically Giger, as more of an aesthetic match than a thematic match, right? So it's just these things look like Giger, they look like Bekczynski, but they don't have the same meaning. They don't have the same underlying themes. They're not making you think the same stuff. Maybe if I played it again, maybe I would disagree with that. But I think that's, and is that a criticism? I don't know. That's tough. If you take inspiration from an artist, can you just take the aesthetics of that artist and recreate the stuff that they made? Do you have to match the thing that they were talking about? I think that's complex. Definitely when it comes to, paintings and things like that are really up for interpretation. So I don't know about that question, but for now, I'll just say it's not a criticism, and it's just a statement, an observation of Necrophosis. But if you like sort of slower story-centric games, if you liked Scorn, but maybe you kind of just wanted to be immersed in the world and not have bad combat, Necrophosis would be the game for you. I would highly recommend it. Herdling by Okamotive, another great Okamotive game and another game I reviewed. So if you haven't seen that review, go check it out. It has a very simple premise. You're a shepherd who's herding these animals, and you herd them out from a city. And as you travel, you find more of them and rescue more, and you're going from the city out into the mountains. And there's puzzles and danger that you have to avoid. And it's very cute, and it's very Okamotive, where it feels there's a sense of joy at the natural world. There's a sense of wonder at the natural world, but there's also a sense of danger. There's also a sense of there's an environmental sense, right? So like in Okamotive's previous games, Far Lone Sails and Far Changing Tides, those games were about climate change. They were about pollution and things like that, right? And it was pretty explicit. In this one, you don't see, the world is not ruined. You see humans, you see people, you see trains and cars and stuff like that. But as you travel outside the city, you see much of it abandoned, and it transitions from human civilization and industrialization into wild territory. I remember when I viewed it, I saw that I interpreted that as like this environmental pastoral desire to escape the doldrums of modern life and sort of find something freer, something more clean. So I'm searching for a word, but I'm not finding it. Something more pure. Pure. That's the word I was looking for. I've always admired Okamoto's talent with environmental storytelling. I think they do a good job with that and with the way that they work in their music. Both dynamic soundtracks that like pick up as the game picks up, and also just little moments of soundtracks where a leaf blows in the wind and there's a little musical sting or something like that. But again, Okamoto here does a good job with the environmental storytelling. It's not the creatures themselves. You can't really tell what they are. You can't really see their legs. They look like they may be slugs, but also woolly mammoths. So it's like, but they have tongues. If you pet them, they'll like lick you and stuff. So they're a mix of different animals. And to me, that made me feel like they had some kind of mystical power about them. And obviously in the game, if you start a stampede and you run through flowers, the animal's fur lights up, it glows. So again, it's like there's something mystical, something magical about them. So they're not just regular animals. They are a piece of nature that is endowed with like some kind of spiritual power or something, which I thought was interesting. Again, adding to that desire to have to meet some kind of like pastoral nirvana or something. I don't know, but that was one thing I admired, was how the animals looked, how they felt real. Like it looked like they had legs when they walked, but if you looked up close, there was no legs. It just looked like they were a snail or something. The environments were really interesting. Again, you head out from the city, you get into the mountains, but in the mountains, it's not just mountainous. You find ruins, you find evidence of a different kind of civilization, a different kind of being, I guess. And I think it leaves a lot of that for the player to interpret and to think about. And I don't know, Okamoto's games, they make you, in a short amount of time, they make you feel scared, they make you terrified of nature, they make you they make you fall in love with different aspects of nature. They make you, they find this sense of awe about things in the world. And they also make you mad at times, because you see the destruction, the industrialization, the pollution and stuff like that. And so, I really admire their storytelling. And Okamoto has made 3 games. All of them are good. Far Changing Tides, I think, is the second one. I thought it was okay. I didn't like it as much, but it was still good. It wasn't bad by any stretch. But 3 games in, and it's 3 excellent games, and this was another one. Okay, Navicula Meatus by Torgomind. I'm not going to have much to say about this, because Navicula Meatus, there's talking and there's dialogue, but none of it's in English, and I don't believe the subtitles are an actual language. I could be wrong. Maybe it is an actual language and I'm being incredibly offensive right now, but I don't think it is. It's like a scavenger hunt game where you're some kind of monster in this weirdly monstrous world. The game's, but it's also comedic. I'm already having trouble like figuring out what to say about it. But anyway, so you walk around and you talk with monsters, all of whom I guess are relatively friendly, and they tell you to get something, and you just see an image of some kind of doodad or something, and you have to go find this, and then you have to give it to that monster, and it's just a chain of scavenger hunts and fetch quests where different monsters find you to tell you to find different things, and then you go find those things, and eventually you reach the end. It's very creepy. Many of the monsters make like really creepy sounds. The monsters also do not have like a uniform construction to them, right? Like the first monster you find is like a Jabba the Hutt dude. Later, there's a being that's got like rings around them that looks more celestial than like a sludge monster. And then there's a mushroom guy that just looks, I don't know, he looks like he's out of D&D, and he even has a face like a normal face. So yeah, all these different like weird creatures and characters. It's like you're in the Mos Eisley part or whatever, and they're just telling you to go grab stuff. And the thing that I think is comedic about the game is it's this game with all these monsters, but you start in an apartment building and you walk outside, and for all intents and purposes, it looks like a pretty normal street. Like, you've got creepy lights. There's a couple stores. There's a church. There's a what kind of looks like a bus stop or a train station, but it leads to a boat. Navicula Meatus in I think it's Latin, translates to boat route. That's just according to Google Translate. I'm looking at my notes. I want to say that's Latin. So what does that mean? No idea. So it's like, it's a very, for a town comprised of monsters, it's a very normal town, which I think is kind of funny. But again, it's one of those things where, you're thinking about, like, what is this? Why does this exist? What is this trying to say? What is it trying to communicate? And you're kind of getting lost in the world and the atmosphere, and that's a ton of fun. I love stuff like that. And I'm not even going to try and interpret it. I'm not good at that anyway, but like, I don't, it being a boat trip, I think is maybe partially significant, because it feels like when we tell stories and myths about traveling somewhere, we don't, I don't know, how do I put this? We never use like cars or planes. It's always a boat, right? Like the river Styx, and Karen, who takes you across and maybe that's because that myth came from a time when people didn't have trains and stuff. But there's just something mythological about that, right? Maybe it's because so much early travel in human history, if you had to go across water, it was going to be like a big deal. I don't know. Or that was like more complex than traveling on land. So it was like a bigger deal. I have no idea. But is there something significant to the fact that the game is named Boat Route or Boat Trip or whatever I have in my notes, Boat Route? Maybe it's like a passage. Maybe you're in a town awaiting your time to leave. I really have no idea. But I enjoyed it, and you should go play it and just dive into it and go on a creepy scavenger hunt, because it's a lot of fun. Okay, so now we're going to get into games that I haven't finished yet. And I'm probably not going to finish for a while, but there's still stuff I want to say about them. I'm always hesitant when I talk about games that I haven't finished, because I don't know how my reaction to something will change once I have seen it all the way through, or once I've seen the ending or whatever. So yeah, just a small disclaimer. The first one we're going to talk about is Labyrinth of the Demon King by J.R. Houdenpole, I believe. Houdenpole. It's an old school survival horror, low poly visuals, very reminiscent of Silent Hill. I mean, if you watch some of the footage, it's going to be, and you're a Silent Hill fan, it's going to be apparent right away. You're a samurai who is out to avenge the death of their lord by a demon. So the demon tricked this samurai, they died, or tricked your lord, they died, and then the samurai decides to go out for revenge. Like I said, I have not finished Labyrinth of the Demon King, but I don't know, going out for revenge against a demon doesn't seem like something that you would have good luck at. I don't know how much I like it. I think I like it a lot, but it is in some ways it is very tedious. It's very combat heavy, and it is a labyrinth. You have a map, but it doesn't tell you where you are on the map. At least I haven't found anything that does yet. There is a compass, so maybe I should... Sorry. See, this is what I mean. I haven't finished the game yet. But to begin with, you don't know where you're at on the map. So you kind of have to navigate by, like, what's around you, your environment, to tell where you are. And the combat is dangerous. It doesn't take very many hits to kill you. And obviously, in a classical survival horror sense, you have to hoard your health and hoard your resources as much as you can. So if you get into combat a lot and you take a lot of damage and you're using a lot of health, health items, health potions, whatever, then that's going to set you back. You know, you're going to have to search for more, or you're going to have to avoid fights instead of taking them on. So it's going to get, you know, it's a battle of attrition. And that type of survival horror, I don't think we've seen, at least not on the AAA level, in a while. The past few Resident Evils, outside of the remakes, but even like the remake of Resident Evil 4, were more like action-y than survival. Still some survival elements, but nothing like Resident Evil 2 or Silent Hill 2, the original Silent Hill 2, which felt definitely more like a survival game. The Silent Hill 2 remake, I think, edged closer to Resident Evil, where you had a little bit more ammo, there was more combat and stuff like that. And you weren't like walking around beat up because you had to save your health for when you really, really needed it. But Labyrinth of the Demon King does that. Now, the reason that I don't know if I like it is that there is a Souls-like element to it, where you pray at a shrine to save your game. And whenever you pray there, you get your health back and stuff like that, but enemies respawn. So that adds to the survival aspect, because you have to decide, you know, if I go back and I save and I get my health, at least I remember you getting your health back, then I have to fight more enemies. On the flip side, maybe you run past enemies. Maybe you already know where you're going, so you don't have to worry about fighting enemies. Like, who knows? There's different ways to do things, but but sometimes it's just like, the atmosphere is really good. It's really creepy. The visuals are nice. And sometimes, you know, you kind of just want to be able to breathe in that. You don't want to have to continuously fight the same type of enemies. That attrition can sort of wear you down and get repetitive and get kind of annoying. And sometimes it ruins the mood, sure. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I got pretty far into it. I defeated the first boss and I was enjoying it. And I was really impressed by some of the visuals, some of the storytelling of it. But yeah, I think if there's one thing about it that is divisive, it is that structure. It is that Souls-like structure that I think maybe some people are kind of getting tired of. Combat is very basic. You parry. Well, it's kind of basic. So your parries are timed, so you don't hold to block like in Skyrim or whatever. You press and then your character blocks for like a few seconds and then puts their sword back. So you kind of have to time your block with it's not that difficult with the enemy's attacks, but you can get it wrong, and enemies do have like follow-up attacks you have to be careful of, and you can run out of stamina pretty quickly. So it's a combat system that I think works, and I've had some fun with, but again, the insistence on it being like ever present and always there, I think can get a little tiring at times. It is neat though that when you do refresh and you start running back through the labyrinth, their enemies are in different spots, so you're not always fighting the same enemy in the same exact spot. And sometimes there are like two enemies that'll be fighting each other, and you can sort of just ignore them and run past them. And there have been times where I've just ran past enemies completely and I've just ignored them, which is very survival horror. And that seemed to be a strategy that worked. So I don't know. That's why I don't know if I dislike it. If I play it more and I avoid enemies a little bit more, and that combat doesn't get in the way too much, then I think maybe, maybe I'll come away from it saying, no, that was pretty good. You just kind of have to, don't worry about combat as much. But I have to finish it. Routine by Lunar Software. I did finish Routine, and I really like Routine. Routine actually, I think, was the first time in a long time that it felt like this. I played a horror game and I was like, this is probably one of my favorite horror games of all time. It's not a unique game necessarily. Routine has some very basic run and hide horror aspects. Obviously the analog VHS, low tech vibes draw lots of people in, and again, that's something that is in vogue at the moment. But Routine did a few things that I really, really liked. It threw in a few twists. So not just how you interact with menus and stuff like that. You use a multi-tool and that's how you interact with menus. That's cool and neat or whatever. When you're trying to defend yourself from enemies, you have to look through this creepy tool, and it can fire like it's a maintenance weapon, or it's a maintenance tool that's meant to fire like electric bolts at stuff or whatever, but you can use it to defend yourself from like the robotic enemies. But it's creepy to do it because you aim down this camera and the camera has really poor quality. So you're like, oh God, how close are they to me? So all that setup works and is creepy and all that. But, it does a few things with its run and hide horror that I kind of wish other games would do in some ways. Run and hide horror, you've got the basic kind where there's a big enemy you can't do anything against and you just have to run and hide from him, and lots of games have had something like that. Different Amnesia games, different games by Bloober Team, right? So the basic like run and hide structure. And then you have something like Alien Isolation, where you can combat the enemy, you can combat the xenomorph in different ways. You can't outright kill it, but you can scare it away, you can distract it, you can toy with it. So you can, you're not completely defenseless. There are ways where you can fight back, in a sense, against the thing that's hunting you. Routine doesn't go so far as to match Alien Isolation, but it does give its enemies a little twist. So like, minor spoiler for one thing. One of the enemies are like killer robots, right? So it's generic. These robots are maintenance robots that all of a sudden are killing everybody. Oh no. But the space stations, you're on the moon. So the moon base's security system can only control one robot at a time, right? So you will see, as you're sneaking through hallways, you'll see like a deactivated robot, and that robot is inert. It's not doing anything, so you can run by it. But at any time, the security system will flip which robot it's controlling. So all of a sudden, you'll be trying to sneak by a robot, and that robot activates, and now, it's terrifying, whatever. And at first, this is a little confusing because you don't know exactly what's going on. Pretty quickly, you read that, it can only control one robot at a time. But what this does is it makes it where the AI can catch you in ways that surprised me. So like one way was, there was an L intersection, and I was running down one of the straightaways, and one of the legs of the L was a robot that saw me. So I turned around and went the other way, and there was another robot that saw me. So the AI switched to the other robot and started walking back this way. And so I turned around and ran this way, and this robot activated and pushed me back up. So the AI corralled me into a corner because it kept switching to the robot that I was running to escape the one it had activated. That I thought was really cool. In the middle of it, very much like a pickle play in baseball, right? Where a base runner is caught between like two bases and they keep throwing the ball back and forth. At the time, I was more impressed than I was terrified because I was like, holy crap, this thing, they're actually like corralling me. And to think that outside, I understand it's just a video game. It's just, game AI doing what it needs to do. But the thought that like diegetically in the world of the game, there is a security system that is reacting to you in real time and trying to catch you in that way, that just feels terrifying. So that I thought was really cool. Another enemy, what the game does is it gives it two states. So there is a patrolling state and a guarding state. So it patrols just like a lot of run and hide horror enemies, and you can hear it, and you can hear its footsteps, so you know when it's getting close. And then every now and then it'll just stop and you don't hear anything. And that's because it is now guarding somewhere. So it's like watching a door or watching a hallway. So that gets terrifying because when it's walking around and you can hear it, you know when you're far away, you know when you're safe because it's somewhere else. But when it stops and it's guarding somewhere, now it's like, okay, now I have to go slower. I have to lean around corners. I have to be careful of what I'm seeing or what I'm doing because this thing is waiting for me, which is terrifying. Another thing I really liked about Routine was the architecture and the way that everything looked. I mean, outside of the VHS, analog stylization, it was the architecture and the level design was just creepy. There was a lot of concrete. There was a lot of like brutal walls that were very rudimentary. When you think about space stations, or when you think about moon bases, or what sci-fi in general, like, I don't know, I don't imagine a lot of concrete, these materials that are sort of basic, these materials that are low tech, not necessarily high tech. When you think high tech, you think metal and lights and stuff like that, right? That evokes different feelings, right? If you imagine the Nostromo, how does the Nostromo make sci-fi feel creepy? It's like how it's lit, how it doesn't feel sleek. It sort of feels industrial and modular, and there's all kinds of little corners and weird things like that. Routine, in a similar way, does that in its own way. There are moments where it's like, there's like water dripping from the ceiling and you're not really sure why. But then you're like crawling through a tunnel and the tunnel is made of concrete, instead of, or an air duct or something, or a maintenance duct. And it's like a concrete tunnel as opposed to a makeshift maintenance, tunnel, which doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't totally make sense. So to me, a lot of that was just unsettling. Just the way that the moon base was structured, the way things were built. It felt like there were purposes to things that were greater than you, things you totally didn't understand, things that maybe were paranormal. And it was just, it made you feel off. It made you feel kind of weird. And I really admired that. And I thought that was awesome. So yeah, despite Routine being relatively generic in a lot of ways, I think it found ways to rise above that. Its story was interesting. Again, another story about like birth and procreation, and there was a ton of symbolism in it, which very, very not subtle at all symbolism. But I think it rose above a lot of that generic design to create something that was really good. And just because you use tried and true mechanics doesn't mean you can't make a good game, right? I don't know. Just because something is similar to stuff you've played before, I think if you give it that interesting architecture, you give it that interesting atmosphere, you give your enemies just a little twist, make them do something a little bit different to surprise the player, to give the gameplay a little bit of a wrinkle. I think that's great. I think that's a good way to make yourself stand out, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel and do a whole bunch of stuff, right? So I don't know. We have this conversation a lot. We want new things. We love old things. We love when new things look like old things, et cetera, et cetera. We don't like when old things feel too old. It's complicated. But to cap off this discussion, I think Routine, again, like rose above just being a generic horror game through its story, through its atmosphere, through its architecture and level design, through all kinds of stuff that it did. And it made it, for me, I think, one of my favorite horror games ever. I have to mention Battlefield 6 by Battlefield Studios. I'm a big Battlefield fan, and I had a lot of fun with the multiplayer. Yes, it needs better maps, it needs bigger maps, etc., etc. The live service economy sucks. That's all goes without saying. The single player was horrendous. I made a video about that, but it felt like a step in the right direction. It felt like a step toward old school fun Battlefield, and in a way that I don't think I have felt in a long time. Would I want a Battlefield more in line with Battlefield Bad Company 2, where things are a bit slower, maybe? Yeah, I would like that. But again, Battlefield 6, I thought did a solid job. And I wanted to mention that here for that tepid praise. It did a solid job. It's Battlefield. I had fun. So yeah, Battlefield 6. Ghost of Yotei from Sucker Punch. So again, a game I haven't finished yet. And I don't know if I should have this on here or not. It's another game that it's like, I like it, but I bounced off it pretty hard. I think a lot of it is just, to me, a lot of the game is just uninteresting. I thought the open world was very uninteresting, very generic. It didn't give me, I don't know. there's good and bad. So the good stuff is I think the combat in Yotei is good. And I think the bounty hunting and stuff like that is good. Some of the side quests are awesome when you're going on these like mythical tales about different like ghosts and stuff like that. That stuff is awesome. But I don't know, I just wasn't motivated to like go through the world and find all the stuff and do all the checkmarky stuff. It's just not a super interesting open world, I think, in terms of gameplay. Like, obviously the game is beautiful. It's gorgeous. The visual effects, I mean, just like the first Ghost of Tsushima, I mean, it looks amazing. But I don't know, there was never, I was like, oh, I can't wait to go over here. Oh, I have to complete these. Oh, I can't wait to explore this. It was just a lot of it felt very beautiful, but samey, which I'm not a huge fan of. I like Atsu a lot as a character. I like that she's pragmatic, to the point. She does have a dark sense of humor, which comes out every now and then in her own way. And Yotei gives her a certain backstory that I think makes sense for why she is like that, why she has a certain discipline and terseness to her, her military background. And so it all connects and it makes sense. Something that I think I would say is maybe a criticism is it's a revenge story. So there's one thing there. There's lots of games about revenge stories, and it's like, what do you want to say about revenge? What is new here? What are you getting to? And in the first game, Jin has to reconcile his past with what he's become, right? And again, it may not be like the greatest storytelling of all time, but there's something there. There's some kind of, a character has to figure something out. In Yotei, Atsu sort of already has it figured out, so she starts where she's committed. And for much of the time that I have played, she has remained there. She is committed to taking out the Yotei 6, to avenging her family, and that's it. Are we going to... Again, I haven't finished it, but it's like, if the story doesn't turn into one where she is introspective and thinks about that, if there is no twist, and if it just ends as she goes out there, takes care of all the bad guys, and then that's it, that's going to be disappointing, because I feel like there has to be some kind of twist. There has to be something that, a change in Atsu somehow, in her circumstances and her personality, that makes her think about something, that makes her maybe change her opinion of something. I don't know about if that's forgiveness or letting go rather than revenge, whatever it may be. But the game hasn't reached that yet. She is still committed to her quest, and if it stays there, then I think it's kind of an uninteresting revenge story. But we shall see. Donkey Kong Bananza by Nintendo. So I've had a lot of fun, a lot of distracting fun with Donkey Kong Bananza. It is hard for me to stay on task because there is so much you can do. Sometimes it's just fun to dig a hole in Donkey Kong Bananza, or make a gigantic crater and get a bunch of gold or whatever. So it kind of taps at my like 12-year-old brain, where I just kind of want to mess with something for hours on end. But when I focus, I mostly really enjoy it. I think a lot of people really, really liked Donkey Kong Bananza, and platformers are hit and miss for me. Some I love, some I'm just like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool, whatever. But I think, I don't know. Again, this is another game I haven't finished yet, although I have gotten pretty far into it. What I would say of Donkey Kong Bananza thus far is that it feels a little too easy in a lot of ways. I understand it is a game that is meant to be played by both children and adults, and that's fine. But even with that said, I never felt that like the Breath of the Wild games were too easy. I felt that they challenged you in different ways. Donkey Kong Bananza, I think sometimes it's got this wide breadth of stuff you can do, of how you can manipulate the world, how you can go through it, how you can solve puzzles, how you can sort of break puzzles, right? In Donkey Kong Bananza, there have been puzzles where I have broken out of the level and found my own way to solve the puzzle rather than going through the puzzle that the developers made. And that's awesome that they allow you to do that. And they know you're going to do that, right? I think they set up the level that way, knowing some players may go through our little obstacle course, and some players may bash through the wall and take the easy route and bash through the other wall and get to the bananas at the end. And I think that's cool that they made it that way. They allowed you to have fun that way. But what I would say is that it feels like sometimes the game is a little too easy, the boss fights and stuff like that, where I want to use all these fun abilities. I want to be a little more creative. Like I want to see more insane ideas with Bananza's versatile gameplay. But the boss fights that I've come across come down to, you smash the guy a few times.
Phrasing.
You punch the guy a few times, and that's it. That's all you got to do. You win the boss fight, as opposed to, again, something like you think about Tears of the Kingdom, the different types of boss fights in that, and how they can get really difficult. They challenge you in different ways, and so they use different aspects of the gameplay to test you or whatever, and that's cool. And it's more of a thorough way to unpack like its gameplay systems. And I don't know if Bananza has really done that yet for me, but I'm going to keep playing it because it's really fun to just sit back and smash stuff and smash enemies and explore around the levels and whatnot. And it's really impressive to see on the Switch too as well, because there's a lot going on. It's like persistent. It saves your destruction when you do certain things. To see all that running and to see it running like at a perfect stable frame rate in a way that I'm not sure the Switch could handle, the first Switch, is impressive, and it makes me excited for like what else Nintendo is going to be able to do with the Switch 2. Mohrta by Scumhead and or Soil. Mohrta is a FPS Souls-like with like low poly PS1 type visuals. Another game I have not finished yet, but that I have been really intrigued by and that has really drawn me in. It uses a bunch of different environments. There's a bunch of different weapons. The premise of the game is that you are a hunter who is going to these different dimensions. So you're like dimension hopping, and then you're in that dimension, you're on a quest to like take somebody out, take some kind of powerful person out. So you go through a level. The levels are pretty linear, and again, they have like a Souls-like structure to them for sometimes. Other times it's a little more linear, and you go through, you beat enemies, you shoot enemies, whatever. And then you get to the boss, and the bosses can be quite tough in some instances. And then you upgrade your health, your armor. You have the special abilities, secondary abilities with weapons that take up like a magic type resource. And there's a thing you can use to regenerate that resource. So just like how a Souls-like, you upgrade your health flasks and things like that, it's very similar. And the place that you do that is like a subway station between dimensions. So there's all these like weird, interesting characters that you talk with, aliens and other fun people. And that's where you upgrade your stuff. And then you go to like this weird observatory, there, observatory looking room. And that shows you like the different universes. And you go to those and you have a good time. And then once you get through them, you unlock like new weapons and stuff like that. But I've had a lot of fun not knowing like what's next. There are a lot of different environments. There are really different types of enemies. Some enemies feel more like sentient. Other enemies feel more like they're monsters. It's really neat. The atmosphere reminds me a lot of Half-Life 2. Because it presents you with all these interesting visuals, with all these moments where you're supposed to be struck by something, but there is no musical cue. There is no like insistence that you see it. It just happens. So like in Half-Life, you'll see the tower out in the distance or some kind of other interesting sight, and it's just there for you to observe. There's no there's no musical cue that plays, that swells when you see it. It's similar here in that the levels in Mohrta, it's kind of muted. There's not a lot of music. There's music in spots, but for the most part, it's pretty quiet. So you're kind of just walking around these like silent linear levels, and it's kind of creepy and kind of unsettling, and you never really know what to expect. But in that, it's immersive. The combat is fairly easy for the most part. I haven't gotten into situations where it's like where I was banging my head into a wall trying to get past a certain sequence or anything. But the boss fights can be difficult, and again, I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know how difficult it will get later on in the game, but it hasn't dissuaded me from continuing to dive in and like see what's around the corner. The different enemy types and locations and locales and environments have made me really interested to see like where this goes and what the story is going to end up being. There is like an overarching story, and I'm not sure you're playing a good character. It's nice to get into a shooter as well. I miss like old school shooters. I haven't, like, I don't know, like I miss Half-Life and Halo and just old school like corridor, interesting level design shooters. I played Attica recently, which was a really good shooter. I kind of miss games like that, and they're not really made on the AAA scale anymore. You kind of have to find indie versions. So when I do, it makes me happy because I think there's a lot of, you know, that genre is far from, it's well tread, but it's far from like emptied out. There's all kinds of stuff you could do with an interesting like story-based shooter. I think somebody just has to do it. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 by Warhorse Studios. Oh boy, what to say about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2? There are lots of historical games. Lots of games take place at some point in world history, but KCD 2 for me is one of the most, I don't want to, I've used, immersive is an overused word, and I've already overused it talking about these games, but it's a game that really makes you feel like you're in a time and a place. It's not just a setting. It's not just, you know, I think some of the Assassin's Creed games, it's like, yeah, it's cool to be in a place, but I don't know, does every game really make you feel like you're actually there? Like it, like, I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, in a lot of different ways, it really like rings out what it was like to be in a time and a place in ways that I think are difficult for games to do. You know, because it is very, in a lot of ways, it is tedious. It's a simulator in a lot of ways. You know, your armor breaks down, your shoes break down. You have to get all that repaired. You have to wash yourself off. You have to clean blood off of yourself after you get into a fight. You have to sharpen your sword. You have to eat. You know, there's all this stuff you have to do. All this like management stuff that I'm sure some people just detest. And I understand that. But when you do those things, you start to get an idea of like what life is like in this area. You know, if you need a cobbler to fix your shoes, you have to go find a cobbler. So you have to go to a town with a cobbler, which I'm not a history expert, and I think the game is set in like medieval Bohemia. that's a complete guess. We're gonna say that medieval Bohemia, somewhere in Germany, somewhere, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that period of history, but that was something you'd actually have to do, right? Like you couldn't not, you know, unlike modernized America, you know, there isn't a shoe store. You're not always within, you know, 20 miles of a shoe store, and which is connected by a highway. You know, there's all these little tiny things that you have to go, and that's going to take up your day. Night and day in KCD2, you know, nighttime is pitch black. It is pitch black. So if you need to do a bunch of stuff, you have to do it during the day. At night, people are asleep. If you get caught sneaking around, guards are going to be suspicious, so you have to hold a torch when you're walking around. So it's just not as easy to do stuff at night because it's dark, just like in real life. So there's all these ways that the game sort of puts you in a position where it feels like you are really living the life of somebody in medieval times. I forget what the year the game is set. It's somewhere between like 1400 and 1650, somewhere in there. All that is like the same time period, and for that I'm sure there are historians that would love to kill me, but like somewhere in there. I never finished KCD2. I want to get back into it. I really have to be in the mood. I love the game. I was having so much fun with it. It really is like a slow burn of an RPG, where you slowly start to get your skills. You slowly start to get better at the combat and better at sneaking and a better idea of like how to work within the game. And I'm glad that Warhorse Studios sort of stuck to their guns there, because I think we get too caught up in like, will players like this? And it's like, well, you know, I'm sure there are players that will like this. So if you find that audience, then you're fine, because not everybody is going to like everything, and not everything should be market safe. And KCD2 is not a mass market game. Maybe I'm underestimating, maybe it could be a mass market game. I don't know. I didn't think Baldur's Gate 3 would be a mass market game, and it became a mass market game. But, so KCD2 does a lot of these things, a lot of these like simulatory things that I think that are turnoffs for a lot of people. But in that it creates something that you can't exist without those things. But at the same time, yeah, it's like it's not a game I can relax to. It's a game that if I decide I'm going to finish some quests, it's like, okay, I have to be ready because this is going to take a while. I'll have to find food. I'll have to, eventually I did get a horse, thank God. So it's like, okay, now I can ride my horse. I don't have to worry about going to a cobbler every 15 minutes. So it's regimented, and you have to like plan for things. You can't just hop in and hop out. I've told people this year that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is like Squad, but instead of it being a modern military shooter, it's a medieval RPG. But it's the same thing where it's like Squad, you kind of just have to be in the mood for it, and you have to be ready to have a certain patience with things and put up with things that you're not going to have to do in Battlefield. That all that is like smoothed over in Battlefield. Where in KCD2, it's like, nope, this is a simulator. You have to take all these things into consideration. I haven't really progressed the main plot line much at all. But outside of just like how it takes you into this historical world, I think the story, the quest lines are interesting. It has to, because these people in this world, they really do believe the things that they say they believe. There's a quest line about a baby that dies during childbirth, and the father thinks that the baby is going to hell because the baby wasn't christened. But that's a belief that person really has. Like, that person really believes that their child is now in hell because something went wrong during birth. And, whether that's wrong, whether that's right, whatever, just encountering that level of storytelling where characters are written in a way that they realistically feel like that, I think that's challenging. And it also... it being involved in that world is just, I don't know, it makes you take the world seriously in a way that like other games don't, where you can just fast travel after that and it's fine or whatever. KCD2, you can't fast travel. You can fast travel, but there's a map you go over, and you might, and you watch the little character like travel across the map, and you may encounter bandits or whatever. Henry is also a very likable character, affable, kind of stupid sometimes, kind of funny, but also smart, heroic. Sort of this game gets compared to Red Dead Redemption 2 a lot, which I would agree. And yeah, I would say Henry's a little bit like Arthur Morgan in some ways. And you can change that depending on some of the action. I assume you can make you can do more evil things with Henry, or you can be more of like a hero with Henry. But I think he's a fun character just because he's sort of an everyman who is caught in this ridiculous situation, and he's just trying to make the best of it. And he's not, the smartest or the strongest or the greatest, fighter of all time. He's just a guy trying. He's the son of a blacksmith who's just trying his best, and that's fun to watch on screen. Split Fiction by Hazelight. Hazelight has, I think, established itself as, I don't know, every game they make is going to have an audience. They have a certain style and sense of humor that is unique and makes for experiences that I don't think are really replicated anywhere else. I can't think of other, I don't know. They are so committed to co-op, to couch co-op, to making that work in a way that I think goes past a gimmick into, like, I don't know, interesting design choices and sticking to their guns when it comes to like difficult platforming puzzles and stuff like that. A lot in Split Fiction, I think, can be pretty difficult, especially if you're playing with somebody who is a more casual gamer or somebody who doesn't play at all. A lot of the stuff in Split Fiction could be really challenging, but they sort of stick to their design and the depth of their design in a way that I really appreciate, while making the game accessible and able to be played by a lot of people. So I think that's a design challenge that they probably have to really fight with a lot. Where do they cross that line, et cetera, et cetera. Split Fiction is a really good demonstration of like their ability to handle that. I think Split Fiction does a good job introducing mechanics and then using those mechanics as much as they can before they get tiring and switching to something else. Yeah, the story is obviously, it's not subtle. It's not, there's no like, the bad guy's last name is Raider. It doesn't take a lot to understand what he wants to do. The worlds you encounter, the Mio's worlds and Mio's sci-fi worlds and Zoe's fantasy worlds are generic. There's not a lot of like definition to them, I think. But I mean, I don't know. I think that's not the point of the game. The point of the game was not to give Mio a story that has a ton of like sci-fi lore. I think that the idea is that their stories say something about who they are. And again, that's not hidden, Mio being angrier, being externally more hostile, Zoe having this like hidden regret, but also like this sense of justice. Both of them have like a sense of justice about them. And you see that manifested in their stories, even if their stories are like relatively generic. They look like a lot of other sci-fi fantasy things. I think that maybe is the point. And that's fine, because again, it's not about what their worlds are specifically. It's about who they are as people, and then how they are as people manifesting in those worlds. And through that, Split Fiction tells an incredibly relatable story about grief, about loss, about how those things drag people down, about how they impact you, about how these side effects of grief can become paradoxically something that you hate, but you want to keep with you, that anger that you want to hold on to for whatever reason that doesn't make sense, but you hold on to it anyway because it makes you feel something. It makes you, Mio's story about her grief and her anger and how she holds on to that, and how that sort of makes her angrier as a person and more hostile as a person. There's consequences to that. Incredibly relatable and really well told. So even though a lot of the stuff is not subtle and it's right up front for you and it's very slapstick funny sometimes, I don't think that devalues the potency of the story. I don't think it devalues the meaning of the story. I think they do a really good job bringing that out. The gameplay stays creative. Hazelight is always thinking of ways that you have to work together, that you have to communicate. And I think that's important. It's one if a co-op game just has two people fighting together and they can sort of fight independently of one another. But it's another thing if you're now codependent, one person has to hold the door, the other person runs through it, etc. Right? And there's a million ways you can do that. So now it's a co-op game that you're playing more intimately with another person, because you have to work together more than just kill all these enemies. Now it's you both have to figure out a way to get this door open, and you have to communicate as you're doing that. Hazelight's really good at that, and Split Fiction is an excellent example. Shape of Dreams by Lizard Smoothie. Co-op, roguelike, action RPG. It gets a lot right. And really, it's one of those games where you've played it before probably, but it's just a really refined, really solid version of something that you've played before, and co-op makes it a lot of fun. The different characters you can play as are a lot of fun, and they are very different. Because it's co-op roguelike, you go through procedurally generated worlds, you get, you have your abilities that you pick up as you're going through the world, and then after you die, you use the resources you gained to build that character up in a persistent way. So again, very much like a lot of other roguelikes, but the combat and the way that the characters can work together is really well done. So like some characters are ranged characters, other characters are melee support characters, which is a little more difficult than just a ranged DPS character, right? So not only do the characters play differently, both in this is a melee character and this is a ranged character, but some characters are more difficult, right, to play as, where you really have to pay attention to what you're doing because you're a melee support. So you may not have as much health, and you're also healing your teammates. So it doesn't, Shape of Dreams doesn't break new ground anywhere. But if you're looking for a co-op game and you like digging into building your character, like building up your stats and really carving out a play style that you enjoy, Shape of Dreams does that really well. I found it on a whim and I recommended it to a few friends and my wife and a few friends, and we ended up playing it a lot just because it was just something that you can always hop into and play together, and it's familiar, if you've played Diablo or Path of Exile or whatever. And the depth to character customization kept me coming back and kept me excited to try the other characters. That would be the only thing that I wasn't a huge fan of in the game, is that you do have to unlock new characters. So there is a bit of a grindy element to it. some people may not like that. I wasn't a huge fan because I was too excited to try out other characters, and I didn't want to have to grind through the game so much, and see so much of the content before I've unlocked the character that like I really like. And if you get bored, try swapping characters, try a different playstyle. There's a bunch to do. So yeah, Shape of Dreams. Avowed by Obsidian. Avowed is a extremely flawed game that I like a lot. There's a bunch that I could say about it that would make me sound like I dislike it. The cities don't feel alive at all. I think the soundtrack is a bit of a letdown, considering Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 both have like amazing soundtracks. And then Avowed doesn't have much of a soundtrack, which is too bad. It's mostly ambient tracks. The level up, the gear system is kind of boring, you're just upgrading the gear that you find to like higher tiers. So if you find a chest or whatever, it's mostly just crafting material, and that's not fun. That's not fun to find a chest and in it is just crafting material, because then you're just finding things that you need, as opposed to finding like something that, a new weapon. Oh, this is a cool pair of boots that does this. And there are different boots and armor sets that do things. But when you're just finding crafting material constantly to upgrade things, especially when you may find crafting material for weapons that you don't use, that's not great. But I do think there is a real RPG underneath all that, with like stats, stuff that people that play hardcore RPGs enjoy, stats that matter and things like that. I turned my character was a spellcasting glass cannon. So I could cast spells all day. I was very powerful spellcaster, but I also had 0 health, so I could not take any damage or I would die. I also played on the hardest difficulty, Path of Pain, or Path of, I don't remember what it's called. But I wanted that because I think, I like when RPG systems really matter. If you put points into a thing, it should really, really matter that it's there. And on harder difficulties, it really matters. Do you talk to this guy or do you try and fight him? Well, if he's really difficult and you're not built to fight him, then you want to try and talk around him or whatever, So I put it on the Path of the Damned. That's the hardest difficulty. And sometimes it was good, sometimes it was not so good. The combat was excellent, mostly. I really loved Avowed's combat. It could get really, really good. But I think sometimes the being on the hardest difficulty kind of broke the combat, where it got comedically way too difficult. It clearly wasn't made for that level of difficulty. A lot of boss fights were just difficult because enemies would just constantly spawn. So rather than bosses being like a creative challenge or some kind of like unique challenge that boss represents, it's just hordes of enemies that are attacking you from all angles, and that's not super fun. That's a brute force way to make a boss fight difficult, and not like a fun way where you have to figure out how to beat this boss specifically. The companions are also really important when you're fighting tough enemies, because their abilities really do help you out, but you can't micromanage your companions, so you can't give them orders to like stay with you or move somewhere. For the most part, the companions are doing their own things. And what that means is they are going to die. Because if they decide to take on the biggest enemy and you'd rather them be somewhere else, they're going to do that and they're going to die. And then all of a sudden you're not going to have your companion abilities, but you can't tell them or give them orders for them not to get in a horrible position where they die quickly. So I think because of that, they become liabilities on the hardest difficulty. And if they die quickly in a fight, you either have to revive them or you're just out of luck. Which sucks, because obviously in like, more traditional RPGs with companions, you can control your companions so that you can better utilize them in a boss fight, right? Maybe you have to babysit them a little bit, but it's just if they die, it's likely your mistake for not putting them in the right position, right? As opposed to Avowed, where your companions are largely autonomous, and so when they die, it's like, well, there's nothing you could have done to prevent that. And that's not great. But with all that said, I still really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad I finished it. I even am a little nostalgic about it, which is weird. I don't really know why. I really do think the story is interesting. There is a lot of good writing here. There is some writing that's not so good. I think some of the dialogue is a little kind of tiresome sometimes. I think, Yotei specifically, she's like the horny one that's always like, hey, I'm into kinky stuff, and it's like, okay, we get it. Her exclamations are always like, oh, Andra's titties or Barath's balls, and it just doesn't come out natural. I don't know if it feels like a character from Pillars of Eternity would say something like that. Maybe they would. I don't know. Now thinking about the previous games. But sometimes it just came across like it just wasn't that funny. Like the humor just didn't work for me. But on the other hand, not all of Yotei's dialogue was like that. And the other companions really did have, I think, interesting personalities, interesting perspectives about the things that were happening, and interesting stories of their own. And that's one of the things that kept me coming back to the game, was I wanted to see how these characters interacted with certain things, or how they, if you get a quest that goes to a specific building that one of the characters will be interested in, it's like, oh, I want to take them with me because they're going to have interesting dialogue or something like that. So Avowed does a really good job of characterizing your companions, and it really feels like everything you did, they thought to themselves, okay, what would Kai do here? What would Giada do here? What would Marius do here? What would Yotei do here? Everything that the player gets into, they consider the companions in that, and that makes the companions feel real, and it makes your relationships with them feel real. So while, yes, there's some dialogue that's like, I get it, you're rolling your eyes, whatever, there was real effort to make your relationship with your companions intimate, not romantically intimate, but just like you really got to know them, and how they would react, to the point that you could sometimes like predict that your companions were going to react one way or another, and it would happen. And I thought that was awesome. I was really getting to know the personalities of my companions. And I thought, I really liked the story. The story was about, it's about colonialism. So it's like an older story because, in our global modern world, colonialism goes by different names and doesn't happen the same way now. But the game is very much about like old school, Napoleonic age, I don't know, colonialism, for lack of a better phrase. You're the envoy of the Adirian Empire. So you're sent out to this island, and there are people on the island that are sort of living by themselves, but they're having trouble, and the Empire is getting a foothold on the island. So the entire story is about this Adirian Empire taking a stronger stance on the island, beginning to exploit the people there. Do the people there deserve to live on their own? Do they deserve to live there at all? All of those politics and all of those things get wrapped into your position as the envoy. And so you have to make these political decisions, and you have to side. You have to pick sides between the people that are living there or between the interests of the empire. And it's not always cut and dry. I mean, for the most part, it is. I mean, if people want to live on their own, then, I hardly think of, saying, no, you have to be a part of the empire. I hardly think that's a good thing. But in other aspects of the story, because it's not just about the Adirian Empire, there's obviously a bunch of other stuff that the game is about. But it does a really good job of making it not cut and dry. There were some decisions in Avowed I had to sit back and really think about, and I had to try and take in like as many perspectives as I could and really think about like what is the correct decision here, morally or legally, whatever. Like what is the correct decision here? And I appreciated that. That made me invested in the world and in how the world worked, and it makes me, and I would assume other people, like want to know more, right? Because if you are encountered in an RPG or any game, you're encountered with a really difficult decision, it's like, well, you want to know more context. You want to know, okay, I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to base it on this, but I want to know X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to read a couple books. I'm going to consider the state of the world, the lore. All those things are going to help me make this decision. And Avowed brings a lot of that out in a way that I think is really skillful and really difficult to do and very Obsidian. So Avowed is extremely flawed. It's not perfect, but and there are reasons for that. I think I want to say that it was planned as a live service game at one point. I may be wrong. I'll put a story up if I'm correct, or I'll cut all this out. But at one point it was planned as a live service game. The development eventually morphed it into a single player RPG, which, you know what? Give me 6 and 7 out of 10 single player RPGs over live service slop any day of the week. I'll take games like Avowed every year if it means I get to have Avowed and not, another looter shooter or something like that. It also makes me excited for, I don't know what Obsidian's plans are for a potential Pillars of Eternity 3. I know people have talked about it. There's been stories where Josh Sawyer has talked about it. But this really does change up the world of Pillars, and it does an amazing job taking the world of Pillars that's already established and adding something new to it that is really interesting and really exciting if you're into that world. So yeah, despite all that, I really enjoyed Avowed, and I may have to play through it again one day. Hades 2 by Supergiant. Hades 2 is largely just more Hades, which is largely a good thing. The combat is great. The enemies are fun and tricky, and you have to sort of figure them out the first time you encounter some of them. The weapons make you react to enemies in different ways and make you move through the levels in different ways. There's all sorts of stuff there that was brought over from the first Hades that Supergiant just absolutely excels at. But is Hades 2 as interesting as the first one? I don't know. Is it as good as the first one? Maybe. But Hades 2 has a different narrative to it. In the first Hades, it was all about Zagreus and Hades and their relationship, and Zagreus on a rebellious streak, trying to escape his father, trying to figure out his past. And you kind of, you're rooted for him in that context. And the other gods, they were kind of there along for the ride. They were watching Zagreus, they were cheering for him, and they were so colorfully depicted. They were so over the top and ridiculous and mean and greedy, at the same time, very much the way that you would expect them to be depicted. And that all made Hades just a really engaging, and every time you got to open a boon and talk with a god, it was just, you couldn't get enough of it because the characters were just so lively and colorful. Hades 2, the gods are still lively and colorful. They're still characters I can't wait to get to know more. Nemesis. There's characters that, you just can't, every time you see their boon pop up, a god, you can't wait to, accept it and see what the god has to say. But there's a different level of urgency because now it has to do with a war that's going on. And Melanoy, the main character of Hades 2, has been trained to go on a quest. So now rather than this family drama about a father and son and something that is incredibly relatable, right? Because, who doesn't have family issues? Who doesn't have relationships like that? Even though they are gods in the first Hades, their problems and their relationships are very human. In Hades 2, it's like gods that are at war, so it's a little less of it's still a human story, but it's not as relatable. I don't know how many people have been, trained since birth to be a warrior that goes to fight Chronos. I'm assuming no one has. So it's it's not as relatable in that sense, and it doesn't feel the stakes don't feel as high. Now, again, I have not finished Hades 2. I know, it's a problem. I have not finished Hades 2. I assume there's a twist coming somewhere down the road. It feels like there is, because there's subplots that are happening where it's not explicitly telling you what's going on, but there's other things happening. It feels like it's hinting that, hey, don't worry, something's going to happen. And I'm like, okay, fine. This isn't the entire game. For me, it just doesn't have the same emotional impact as the first Hades. Because the first Hades was so, you could feel especially in Hades, the character, I think maybe one of the coolest villains of all time, there was so much anger and sadness in his voice and the way he was portrayed. He was a character that was incredibly interesting, and you couldn't wait to talk with and encounter and fight. And that doesn't really appear to be a thing in Hades 2 yet. Chronos as a villain, the Titan of Time, obviously very powerful, but I don't know. He's just he's a bad guy. What's his motivation? What does he want from me? What does he want from the gods? If it's just that he wants to destroy the gods, well, that's fine. That's evil, I guess, but that's not as interesting as Hades and him having to put up with Zagreus while holding this resentment for his life and the way that, his life has gone and stuff like that. it's just not the same type of villain. But again, I need to preface, I should have prefaced this all by saying I haven't finished it yet. How will things turn out? I don't know. There very obviously seems to be a twist coming, and I can't wait for it. One thing that I think I definitely don't like about Hades 2 is that it is more resource-based than boon-based. So in the first Hades, you would find boons, and then when you would get past a room, you would choose between two different gods a lot of the time. And once you got to know these gods, you would have to say, okay, do I want Artemis's powers or do I want Zeus's powers? And you'd have to choose a path. And so you'd constantly have to decide which powers do I like the most? Which ones work with my playstyle better? And so once you learn those things, you would know which gods to choose. Well, on this one, it's a lot of the times it's just resources. So I don't know, you may need this resource over another resource, whatever. But for the most part, the choices aren't as interesting because it's you're going to get both of these resources eventually if you grind enough. So you might as well just go through one or the other door. The choice is not as interesting. It does not involve your play style as much. So there's just less to consider when you're making those decisions. And that's not as fun. It's not as, that doesn't make me think as much. It's just, and now oftentimes I'm just picking doors because it's well, I guess I'll just go through this one, or I'll just get more of this resource, whatever, because it doesn't really matter as much because eventually you're going to get all the resources you need. Whereas in the first Hades, when you're picking between boons, it's oh, I want Artemis's deflect ability because I need that. I know how to use it. And then I went with a weapon that Zagreus's bow and his fan attack that would deflect everything. And so I knew how to utilize it to its maximum efficiency. And that kind of stuff just hasn't appeared I just haven't thought that same way yet in Hades 2. Overall, though, I'm still really enjoying Hades 2. I cannot wait to get into it more. But I think, it sounds like I'm disappointed, but I'm not. I think it's just they tried something different. I don't think it's as good. They tried a few things that I think are fine, but aren't as interesting. And I kind of, if there is a Hades 3 or whatever happens next, I want them to go back to really I think re-examine what made the first Hades so special. Because yes, it was the combat and stuff, but it was also how you interacted with the gods and that level of urgency and the individual personal story of Zagreus, as opposed to being a story about everything and stuff going on off screen that is bigger and grander maybe, but I don't know, does it matter as much? Is it as potent as a story about father and son? I don't think so. But again, Hades 2 is one of the best games this year. It's excellent. It sounds like I don't like it. I do. I love Hades 2. I can't wait to play it more. And I'd recommend it to everybody. I'd recommend Hades 2. Skin Deep by Blindo Games. I absolutely fell in love with Skin Deep. Skin Deep is an immersive sim where you have to save cats. People have called it Die Hard in Space. Skin Deep is just there is so much personality, so much creativity here. If you just take the gameplay itself, where you're on a spaceship that you can open airlocks and go outside and get back inside, that on its own is interesting. Then you throw in the personality of it, where when you don't kill pirates, because pirates have an insurance policy where their head pops off in an orb, and then to get rid of them, you have to toss their orb out and their head orb out an airlock, or else their body regenerates. Funny, hilarious stuff like that. And also when you pick up your enemy's decapitated head, they're pissed at you and angry that you killed them. It's hilarious, and there's so much, but it's also an actual thing that you have to think about. If you take out a bunch of pirates, you have to think about, how am I going to dispose of their heads? So there's personality, there's a gameplay mechanic there, all wrapped into one little experience, and that's just awesome. That's so cool. Nina Pasadena, first of all, just a 10 out of 10 name, Nina Pasadena. It's just she's such a fun character with the way she interacts with the world, with her grunts and her ow and her different sounds that she makes, and the way that she'll change her voice when you talk on it. So sometimes you can find a radio. So if the bad guys find you and you're trying to hide from them, you can find a radio to call them off, and Nina will go, nothing here. She'll change her voice to try and sound like a guard and trick the guards.
Numbers, check in. Alpha here. Everything's fine here.
It's so funny and it's so lively and fun. I really couldn't get over like just the absolute bursting at the seams personality of Skin Deep. But Skin Deep is also just a damn good game as well, and a solid immersive sim. I hate the genre title immersive sim. This is a complaint that I've made for a long time. But you know, Skin Deep, the levels I think are split into, in my mind, like three things. So you start with recon, where you're just learning about the level. You're learning about how does it work. There's one level that you're on a spaceship and it has a library or something, and there's a security system that zaps you if you carry a book out of the library. So it's like, how can I use this? Can I make a guard, a pirate, walk through the security system and toss a book, and that lights up the security system and it zaps the pirate? Like, yeah, like that's something you can do. First thing is like you scout all that, you make a plan. Okay, here's how I'm going to empty this room. Here's how I'm going to take out these guards. And sometimes you have to, okay, well, I have to find the key to this door before I go in there and make a plan. So you kind of have to segment it. And then it's enacting the plan. Okay, now I have to fight these guys. Now I have to kick this guy out an airlock. Now I have to, now you're actually going through the ship and enacting your plan. And then once you do all that, then you get boarded by the pirates because there's a counterattack. And so while you are taking care of the pirates on the ship and saving your cats, saving the cats on board, which is never explained, I don't think, why cats suddenly became sentient and had all these interests in horror movies and skateboards and stuff. I don't think, and magic, I don't think it's ever explained. It's just, that's how it is, which is fine. Once you get past that, then it's like, now you have to prepare for the counterattack. Do you set up traps? Do you leave a bundle of like weapons and ammo somewhere on the ship that only you can find so that when the pirates counterattack, you can go grab it and fight? Or do you just escape? Do you just run? Do you just plan an escape once the pirates get to you? In all this personality, in all this fun, in all this silliness, there is a real crunchy immersive system here. One that I think needs a sequel, because it not because like it is flawed or anything, but just because I need more of it. I need to do more stuff. I need to play more levels. I know there's Workshop, so maybe I should download some Workshop stuff. But there's just so much interesting decisions you have to make. So many little, like, how do I take this guard out? How do I get past this security situation? The level design is so excellent. I kind of need to play more of it. And maybe it's just because I miss like hardcore immersive sims. I don't know. Immersive sims are a category of game that there's a lot of games with immersive sim elements, right? Cyberpunk has like immersive sim elements, but I don't know if I would consider Cyberpunk an immersive sim. Splinter Cell has some immersive sim elements, but Splinter Cell I wouldn't consider an immersive sim. But then you have things like Dishonored, Deus Ex, obviously, Skin Deep, right? These games that are more closely aligned with like the idea of an immersive sim, and we haven't had a lot of them. Obviously we haven't had Deus Ex in a while. We haven't had a Dishonored since Dishonored 2. So to play a game that has such a deep level of like consequence and combat and gameplay, and it's a relatively like small studio doing its funny little thing, but the gameplay is as crunchy as some of these big AAA games, like that is awesome. That is so cool. And as difficult as an immersive sim must be to develop, I feel like there's so much you could do, so much creativity that's left there to have fun with. Prey is another example of an immersive sim that was flawed in a lot of ways, but it was just the stuff that made it fun, and all the options you had to solve puzzles and get past obstacles was just so awesome. I would love a Skin Deep 2. Nina Pasadena is a character that demands a sequel. I want to play as the footless, or she has feet, the shoeless, barefoot Nina Pasadena again, because she's hilarious. And pirates, there's more pirates that need to be taken out. And last, and I don't know, maybe my favorite, Abiotic Factor by Deep Field Games. Abiotic Factor released into early access a couple years ago. It released out of early access this year. I was waiting for it to exit early access. And again, not a game that I have finished yet, but man, maybe my favorite like survival crafting game of all time. Again, in a similar vein to Routine, although Abiotic Factor does much more in its genre, you have a game that has many genre staples. You have to eat, you have to drink, you have to sleep, etc., etc. You have to build forts, you have to build weapons. As you build things, you can build better weapons. You know, you've done this. If you've played survival crafting games, you have done a lot of this. But it sets it in a really unique place. You are in basically Black Mesa, right? So if you've played Half-Life, it's basically you're in Black Mesa. So rather than like surviving in a city somewhere or surviving in a forest, you're surviving in like laboratories and office spaces and conference rooms and stuff like that. And it takes the aesthetics of Half-Life and that, you know, late 90s sort of visual style, and it just it's such a atmospheric. You would think in a game where you're underground and there's like no windows and stuff that wouldn't be much atmosphere to wring out of that, but there is a ton of atmosphere to wring out of that. And because the point of the game is that you travel to other dimensions, so you find portals. The portal takes you somewhere you'll have no idea what you're stepping into. That portal is a little bespoke level with its own resources and stuff that you can find and take back, whatever. And then you go back to the main laboratory, and I forget the name of the big lab that you're in. It's in the middle of Australia or something. It's silly, but then you go back to like the main world where you're building your base, where you're trying to survive, you're trying to escape, you're trying to figure out what's going on. I love playing Abiotic Factor and just being in the underground facility. And it's hard to pin why. Why is it that I enjoy it so much? And I think it's because maybe there's just an element of wish fulfillment. I don't know if you've ever played, you know, Control or Half-Life. There's so much mystery, you know, in Control about the oldest house, or there's so much mystery about Black Mesa or Portal, right? Aperture, right? There's like, what were all this huge facility that, yeah, you see a lot of it, but there's so much that you don't see. And what else did they do here? And what were all these rooms for? And what was, you know, there's so much mystery. And now the idea that instead of going through a game like that and you're just playing through it, now you get to explore that lab. You get to find those mysteries. You get to encounter the unknown. That is such an awesome, you know, it's such a cool premise, and Abiotic Factor does such a good job delivering on that. You will encounter enemies that, yeah, sure, some of them are very Half-Life-like enemies. There's an enemy that's very similar, very reminiscent of a head crab. But then some enemies you'll encounter and you'll have no idea what to do about. You'll just have like, oh, okay, you'll have to, you know, it's a completely new thing. It completely throws you curveballs, and that's just awesome. So I think it's that wish fulfillment of being in a facility like that and finally being able to explore it. And, you know, just like you wanted to when you were 11 or whatever, and you were like so curious about what's behind these walls, you know, what else is there in Aperture besides these testing labs. And that's what Abiotic Factor allows you to do. And I think its survival systems are rather, you know, standard. Its combat is rather standard. I will say that I like the RPG element to it, and I don't know, I can't think, I'm sure there are other survival games like this, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But you level up like with, like for example, with sharp weapons and blunt weapons. So depending on which one you use, you will level up on them individually. Now, there is benefits and drawbacks to each one, right? So if you use blunt weapons, many blunt weapons are two-handed, which means you're more exposed, but you do more damage. Sharp weapons like spears, you only have to hold in one hand, so you're not going to do as much damage, but you get you can hold a shield or something in your offhand, right? So it's like there's, depending on what you want your play style to be, you can sort of level up in an RPG sense. Is it as deep as like an RPG? No. Do you get to pick like abilities? No, you just get the abilities as you level up. But still, that being there, it allows you to contour your play style in different ways. Where you're making choices about things while like your cooking skill is just getting better, right? So if you play with a few people, like I play with a buddy and he does sharp weapons and I do blunt weapons, but we both cook, you know, we both build things. So we have the same skills in those areas, but he has the sharp weapon skills, I have the blunt weapon skills. So that allows us to designate Or, if we find a really strong sharp weapon, it goes to him. A really strong blunt weapon, it goes to me. So it helps organize that. And being absolutely massive, it's a lot of fun to plan out expeditions. When you go to those other universes, it's like, is there going to be radiation? Is there going to be enemies? Are you going to use guns? Are you going to bring weapons? Well, if you bring weapons, you have to bring ammo. You have to bring things to counteract the radiation. You have to throw that in your backpack. So you're going on an expedition away from your main base. And that's so much fun to prepare for, to make sure you have everything set up correctly. And then you go out and you try and survive. You have to, you hoard as much as you can. You break down and get as many resources as you can. But after a while, it's like, okay, do we cut our losses and go? Is this enough? Do you go with a plan where it's like, the resources you want to get to build something, or are you going just to explore? So it's not just a survival game where you're just, there's a couple people and you're just running around and everybody's kind of doing their own thing. It really does help to work together. Maybe one person brings a bunch of food, maybe the other person brings a bunch of health items or whatever. So it really does help to work together, to navigate together, to communicate. There's a bunch of hidden, the lab is incredibly dense. There's like a bunch of different little doors that lead to different places and semi-secret like second levels that you can get to if you jump the right way or whatever. So it helps to communicate all that and to work together and to thoroughly explore. And as you slowly unlock different areas of the underground structure and you make your way and you build your first base and your second base or whatever, man, it's so satisfying. And it's so much, it's such a joy to like jump into the unknown and have no idea what's in this new part of the lab. And then there's a new creepy music that plays. Yeah, it's exactly what you would want out of a game where you finally get to explore like a Black Mesa or something. And I really can't wait to play more. So those are my favorite games of 2025. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable. I really do. If you do know of games either coming out soon or games that came out this year that you think are underrated or whatever, please let me know. I'd love to find hidden gems on Steam. I also love to find games that aren't hidden gems, but I haven't tried, but lots of people recommend to me. So please share those. Follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. Subscribe, like, all that stuff. We will see you next time. Have a good day.